It is time to crown the champion of all champions. That's right, welcome to the Room and Board Deathmatch, where we have had a year's worth of deathmatch tournaments. From January 2022, where we had the champion Nemesis take out runner-up Beyond the Sun, moving all the way down to November 2022 in the Cult of the Old deathmatch, where Croak reigned supreme over the castles of Burgundy. We are here now to crown the best of the best. And since this is the best of the best, if you've tuned into one of these death matches before, or 11 of them, you might recognize some of the competitors. However, in order to make it a fully fleshed death match, we couldn't not include some wild cards, which will be revealed as the tournament progresses. And these wild cards are games that we talked about over on our Discord throughout the course of the year. Games that people liked, that were popular, didn't necessarily make it into a specific death match, but I felt deserved to have their shot competing in at least the group stage. So this is going to be a little bit different because usually we just have our straight tournament voting for one or the other, but in honor of the World Cup and also to make sure that it wasn't just a really good game against, you know, kind of an okay game and having tough matchups, I randomized some group stages. We are going to have 8 group stages where 2 will move on to create a bracket of 16, and those 16 will face off in a battle to the death. And usually the penalty for losing one of these games is to be burned for all eternity. It's the truth. How the runners-up are competing in this when they should have been burned for all eternity, I'll let somebody else figure out that reason. But in this stage, the penalty, and as you can see, the group stages will be flashing by below me right now. The penalty for losing this won't be to be burned. It's a very minimal penalty comparatively. You'll just be frozen in carbonite for 100 years. Get popping out those babies so that they can play these games, because I'm sorry to tell you, all copies of the games that lose in this quarter quell Hunger Games situations will not be able to be played for 100 years. Or you could, but all the components are going to be frozen together in one carbonite block. So, I don't know, you figure it out. And before we begin, if you want to get in on these voting or see what we're talking about in our Discord, or just support the channel in a little way or a large way, if you appreciate the work and the time that I put into making all of these videos, because it consumes my entire existence, well, feel free to join our Patreon. And I want to give a huge shout out. I know it isn't Monday. I feel thrown because I'm not anchored by Crowdfunding Countdown, but I still wanted to do this now rather than wait till next Monday. Just to say thank you and that I'm very appreciative of all of our newest patrons. Brendan, Liz, Randy, Buster, and Vicky, thank you so much for jumping on board. What a lovely New Year's resolution you've done. I'm excited to have you on board for Patreon. I'm excited and grateful that you choose to support the channel with your hard-earned money, and I feel very appreciative of that. And to show my appreciation, hopefully I can eliminate all of your favorite games from existence and only leave you with one, because that is what this deathmatch is all about. But seriously, thank you to my patrons, those who just jumped on board, those who are consistent in supporting the channel. I appreciate you a heck of a lot. I just want you to know, okay? Anyway, make your predictions below. We will see all of the winners and all of the runner-ups, all 22 of them from the past 11 death matches, facing off against themselves and 10 wild cards, which will be revealed as we go along. So let's get right into it with the group stage number 1. 2 can move on out of the stage, and we have Titans, Cthulhu Death May Die, Dice Throne, The Crew, and Nemesis. I structured this so in that in each group stage there will be 1 grand winner and 1 runner-up. So if the winners want to retain their spots, well, they've got an easy way to do so, but some of the runners-up might be great games as well. The previous winners of this bracket were The Crew in our Affordable Games Deathmatch and Nemesis in our Space Games Deathmatch. I guess, spoiler alert, this is like watching Survivor Winners at War. If you haven't seen all the other seasons, you're gonna find out who won. But they're facing off against co-op runner-up Cthulhu Death May Die and Shelf of Shame runner-up Dice Throne. And man, oh man, this is a tough matchup. I'll assume everybody kind of knows a little bit about the games because I'm sure you've watched all 11 death matches before. But if you don't know, Nemesis is that semi-co-op set on a spaceship by Awakened Realms, provides really cinematic experiences. Cthulhu Death May Die is another hit by Come On. Their Season 3 was one that I was the most excited about in the past year of 2022, at least of all the games that raised over $1 million. Dice Throne is a game that I have been really into this past year. I've gotten into it and I can see the hype for it. It's a very fun battle Yahtzee. I have a few videos on that. Reviews and ranking the characters. I would only want to play this as a 2-player game though. That's, kind of what I said in my review, but if you do, it's very fun. And then finally we have The Crew, which is accessible, it has such a great price point, a very fun trick-taking game with hidden information, not hidden information, but limited information, limited means of communication if you tuned into all the mechanics series that I was doing recently. The Crew coming in with a really solid game for such an affordable package as our winner of the Affordable Deathmatch. I don't know who is going to win here, and the votes here are tight. You can vote for however many people you want. You can use your extra votes on whoever you want, and as long as it goes through, they're considered used. But it was close. The final votes were 16, 15, 13, and 11. It is unfortunately The Crew that comes in fourth with 11 and is frozen for all eternity, well, for 100 years, in Carbonite, followed closely by Dice Throne, which gets 13 votes. It's Cthulhu Death May Die that reigns supreme with 16 votes, and Nemesis that clinches it with 15 votes. So Cthulhu Death May Die and Nemesis move on into the round of 16. They emerge from the group stage, and unfortunately Dice Throne and The Crew will not be the champion of all champions. Next round we have Mage Knight versus Spire's End versus Star Wars Imperial Assault versus Sleeping Gods. We have the winners of our solo deathmatch and our Shelf of Shame deathmatch that are facing off against the runner-ups of the Hidden Gems deathmatch and the epically long death matches. I'm expecting Mage Knight to move on here, and then probably Sleeping Gods. That's my vibe. Mage Knight is epic sprawling, deck building, best at solo, or you can play solo, you can play with a bunch of people, but it won our solo tournament. Spire's End is also a solo game where it's kind of like a choose your own adventure solo game. And then we have Star Wars Imperial Assault, which also plays very well at solo. I've been told there's an app, and there's like a fan-made app, which is better than the original app, which helps translate everything into a solo experience if you're trying to get that off your Shelf of Shame, which is what helped propel it to Shelf of Shame victory. And then finally, Sleeping Gods is this big sprawling narrative adventure, which I think you might also want to play solo. This seems to be the solo group stage because Sleeping Gods, the benefit of these campaign games is you explore and try to get totems and explore the world and get special items that help you interact, and also kind of a choose your own adventure style of game where you're still managing a ship and your various crew. You kind of want to play those solo as well because they're easier to get to the table and easier to finish. Now, to no one's surprise, the Hidden Gem was unable to emerge from the ashes, and it came in fourth with 8 votes. But then, to my surprise, the other loser of this group stage, it's Mage Knight that falls with 10 votes. Imperial Assault managed to get 12 votes, and Sleeping Gods swept up a 18-vote solid win, propelling both Sleeping Gods and Star Wars Imperial Assault into the round of 16. Mage Knight and Spire's End will not be the champion of champions. Next group stage, Group C, we have Star Wars Rebellion, another Star Wars title seeking to make its way into the final 16. We have Final Girl, we have Trickerion, and we have the Castles of Burgundy. Star Wars Rebellion Star Wars Rebellion was the winner of our epically long board game tournament. Final Girl won the Spooky Deathmatch, and then Trickerion was our runner-up for the Euro Deathmatch, along with the runner-up for the Cult of the Old in Castles of Burgundy. And as I looked back at the votes, it might have changed. There might have been a tie, but even still, it would have been the one with the more extra votes that would have been pushed forward. Trickerion got last place and is out of the group stage, didn't win many votes at all, it only got 5 votes. Nobody wanted to back Trickerion, and so it comes down to Star Wars Rebellion, Final Girl, and Castles of Burgundy, all within a very tight margin of error, But it was Star Wars Rebellion that came out on top with 16 votes, Castles of Burgundy with 15, and Final Girl with only 14, although when I look back now, it has 16, so it could have moved on, but unfortunately, the votes didn't get in time, and it is Star Wars Rebellion and Castles of Burgundy that claim the 2 top spots of Group C and move on into the round of 16. These are some awesome games, and we are not stopping now with Group D, where we have Anachrony versus Western Legends versus Arkham Horror the card game versus Beyond the Sun. And I think it should be known that a lot of people who are voting, who are in the Patreon, are also huge solo players, so you might see it skewing towards games that play well with solo, but we didn't see that with Final Girl. We saw Castles of Burgundy push forward as well. I know there was some talk that they wish Western Legends had A, Kurt Russell on the cover, and B, had a solo mode. Can you imagine Western Legends with a solo mode, just being able to run around in your own little Western sandbox? Actually, Western Legends does have a solo mode. It's called Red Dead Redemption, which is what you can play because Western Legends comes in 4th with 5 votes and is frozen in carbonite for 100 years. And so I was really pulling for Beyond the Sun. Beyond the Sun is probably the game out of this entire bracket that I will want to play next. I think it looks so cool. It's Tech Trees, the board game. I've heard it's really, really good. I just haven't had a chance to play it. And unfortunately, I guess I won't have a chance to play it because it only got 12 votes compared to Anachrony's 16 and Arkham Horror's 15. Those are our top 2, and it is Beyond the Sun and Western Legends that are booted from the competition and into the carbonite bath along with the rest of it. That might have been my favorite group stage. Which of the groups is your favorite? I guess you can wait and see till we get to the wild cards as well. But I'm also curious, if you could pick only a group of 4, which one would you pick? That's kind of a fun game. Now moving on to Group E, we have Burgle Bros, co-op winner, Mansions of Madness, spooky runner-up, Rolling Realms, affordable runner-up, and Crokinole, Cult of the Old winner, all facing off. And I am thrilled with the game that takes top spot. If you didn't watch our co-op bracket, you should, because Burgle Bros' underdog story was one of my favorite ever, and the underdog story keeps on underdogging as it takes top spot here with 17 votes. People love Burgle Bros. I take it back, Beyond the Sun. I want to play Burgle Bros too. I want to play all these games. I love games. That's why I love destroying them, because I hate myself and don't want to ever have a good time. So Burgle Bros moves forward. I'm gonna tell you, Rolling Realms gets cut immediately. It comes 4th place with 9 votes, but then we have a tie. We have a tie for 2nd position in this group stage between Crokinole and Mansions of Madness, 12 votes each. And the rules of the Room and Board Deathmatch state that in the case of a tie, the tiebreaker is whichever game got the most extra votes, because you only get 1 extra vote per tournament, so you really have to use it on a game that you want to push forward, that you want to show your fandom for, and you want to see move on ahead in the standings. And if you're not willing to spend your extra vote and other people are willing, that should speak to the quality and the joy of this game. This game ended up on 2 of the 3 Board Game Co's top 100 list. It is Crokinole that moves forward with the extra vote backing, and Mansions of Madness that is frozen in carbonite for 101 years. I just threw in the extra one because I want it to be more dramatic. Let's move on. To Group F, we have blazed through almost all of the champions and finalists in this competition. We are left with only 2. One, the winner of our Hidden Gems Deathmatch, Riverside, versus Big Trouble in Little China, the runner-up for our thematic deathmatch. And then we have our first 2 wildcards. Wildcard number 1 has been spoken about a lot. Those who love it a ton. We've talked about it a lot in the Discord. I know there's a lot of fans of it, so I wanted to put it forward. That is Marvel Champions. Marvel Champions gets the wildcard number 1 spot in this match. The game where you get to construct your deck and battle a bunch of villains and try to come out on top with a never-ending supply of superheroes at your disposal, at least if you purchase them. That's Marvel Champions, a huge system that a lot of people love. And then wildcard number 2 is one that I threw in, and also something that I think a lot of people have been enjoying. I think it's an awesome value game. This is Dinosaur Island Rawr and Right. I want to give a shout out to Dinosaur Island Rawr and Right because I've just had such a great time with it, and I'm still furious that Dave and Matt have my copy. Especially when Dave said that he hadn't even played it. I know that they were just pulling my pulling my buttons, as the expression goes, but even still. Yeah, Dinosaur Island, Roll and Write, it is a really interactive roll and write, which is what I like. You're drafting dice, and then the dice that's left over has threat on it, which everybody takes, in addition to the resource that everybody takes. And so it feels a lot more interactive than just like a solo roll and write experience, which I find a lot of roll and writes are. So that's what I really like about Dinosaur Island, Roll and Write. But they are up against two champions. The love for Big Trouble in Little China is huge, mainly because of all of the Kurt Russell gifts that we like thrown around up in the air. And Riverside is a really solid, again, a roll and write taking on a roll and write, right? Right. Roll and write, right? That's the reason I put those two together, and I'm not just coming up with this now because there's two roll and write experiences I wanted to see pitted off against each other. Really pit each other right off as you roll the dice. But memes and gifs of Kurt Russell can only get you so far, and that can only get you 6 votes in 4th place. That means one of our wild cards is moving forward, and in fact, you guessed it, nobody cares about hidden gems. We love the things that are shiny and new. 2 of our wild cards are moving forward. Riverside gets 8 votes, but it is Marvel Champions with 19 votes and Dinosaur Island with 13 votes that move on into the round of 16. We have 2 wild cards that are making it in here. It's almost like this isn't a champion of champion match at all. It's going to be filled with 6 to 8. What an upset. Albeit they had a pretty easy competition, but I really thought Big Trouble was going to take it, and I thought Riverside had a... Well, no, I knew Marvel Champions was going to go through. Let's be real. Now let's move on to group number second last, which is wild card 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let's bring the competitors in. We have Kanban EV taking our first spot. Kanban EV, which took 3rd place or was in the semifinals for the thematic bracket. Then let's bring in another semifinalist in the space bracket. We have Terraforming Mars. Board Game Geek's number 6 right now. Of course, if we're having a champion of champion matchup, we couldn't not bring in Board Game Geek's reigning number 1 champion, and that is Gloomhaven enters into the fray. And finally, I wanted to bring in a fan favorite that lots of people talk about, lots of people love to stick in their little beautiful magnetic trove chest and roll those dice all over the place. That's Too Many Bones taking our 4th spot in this matchup. And this is a tough group stage. I tried to make these group stages tough. All of these games are great. Well, I've only played 3 of them. I haven't played Kanban, but I've heard that Kanban is great, and I'm sure it won't be immediately eliminated from this group stage to prove me wrong. And this was a tough one. There was a lot of discussion around these 4 competitors, which I was excited about. I was excited to have a little bit of mystery and reveal and see which the wild cards would get a lot of votes. And I wanted to make sure that the wild cards did get a lot of votes all across the board, because I wanted to make sure that they were good games and I wasn't just trying to push forward my own bounce-off agenda, which we'll see in the next group. This one is tough. I don't know which ones I expected to move on. I kind of expected Terraforming Mars to move on because back in January when we first started this, there were less people voting, and so I was unsure of if Terraforming Mars could have won the space bracket, if it was a different time of year, if more people, we had a larger sample size. So I thought Terraforming Mars would move on, but Terraforming Mars took last place with 9 votes. First place goes to BGG's reigning number 1. That is Gloomhaven. It took it with 16 votes, and then we had another tie between Too Many Bones and Kanban EV, both of which were sitting at 13 votes apiece when you factored in the extra votes. But when I checked, one of them had an extra vote on them from someone who had already used their extra vote to send a previous game through, and so it was considered used, and so that was removed, making it a 13-12 win for Kanban EV. Too Many Bones is out of here. It is Kanban EV that does move forward with Gloomhaven into the round of 16, and unfortunately Too Many Bones and Terraforming Mars, well, while they appear in the same line of my rap, they're both going to also appear side by side, frozen in carbonite, where they belong. Every copy, I cannot stress that enough. If you own a copy of these, watch out, because it's gonna end up just a chunk of metal on your shelf. Although, to be fair, Too Many Bones probably weighs as much as it does frozen carbonite as it doesn't. Anyway, finally, we are at our last group stage before we move into the round of 16, which I will show the bracket once we have established what's moving forward. We have Group H. 4 games take on the world, and those 4 games are Obsession, the Pride and Prejudice board game. It did very well in the thematic deathmatch experience. It took out Nemesis Lockdown right away, which I thought it was gonna get crushed by, but then it lost, I forget, I think maybe to the inevitable winner. I'm not too sure, but I like Obsession. I like the concept of Obsession. I'm excited about Obsession, and I know a lot of people are excited about Obsession. So that is being voted on. Spirit Island takes the 2nd spot in this group stage. Again, regarded incredibly favorably. I know lots of people like it, and lots of people like it for the solo experience as well. There were almost riots when it got eliminated in our solo and our co-op deathmatch. I think it was in both of them, and really made a far run in both. Third, we have a game that is not on any deathmatch whatsoever, right out of left field, but I think it's a good competitor because the complete collection has been arriving on people's doors. I just played this game yesterday again, and oh, it's so good. I want that complete collection, and I do regret not getting it on Kickstarter when it was the best deal. We're looking at Everdell, the complete collection, which is just the base game for Everdell for the purposes of this tournament. But I know there's a complete collection out there. Yeah, it feels like it would be fun to have. I probably made a mistake, but we'll see if I did. We'll see if Everdell moves on. And then, of course, we couldn't have a Champion of Champion tournament without a game that first appeared in our space bracket and has been trying to reappear since, and for some inexplicable reason keeps getting wrenched out of everybody's grasp, but it is here to compete in its actual glory. We have Bounce Off in the last wildcard spot, wildcard number 10. And I wanted to do this because, yeah, you know what? My patrons are funny people, and they like to get behind a joke. You know, they like to make my life miserable, and they try to burn everything I own, and you know what? I know they do that because they care. So I imagined that Bounce Off could make a pretty far run into this competition based off the backs of making it the tournament champion of champions and just completely disrupting the sanctity of the bracket. But I wanted to put it up against 3 games that I think are actually phenomenal. So that's what I did. And I can tell you at least 1 game beat Bounce Off in the votes. Everdell moves forward with 17 votes. And I can tell you that at least 1 game lost to Bounce Off in the votes. Obsession takes the last spot with only 7 votes. So it comes down to Spirit Island versus Bounce Off. Spirit Island, which has been eliminated by the champions every time. Spirit Island that almost beat Burgle Bros and lost to some collusion, letting Burgle Bros sail ahead to victory. It was the victim of a bit then. And you know what? Spirit Island is the victim of a bit now. It is Bounce Off that triumphs over Spirit Island in a 14-13 vote. So our 2 winners from this stage, the Bounce Off dream stays alive. It's Everdell and Bounce Off that move forward, and Spirit Island and Obsession that are cast out of this competition for good. So we have our round of 16. They are right here. It has been randomized. The only thing that I made sure to switch around was if they were fighting off against the same member of their group stage in that first round. I thought that's not that interesting. We kind of know how those votes are going to go, so I made sure to switch those, but I don't actually think that happened once. So I tried to keep that into consideration, but otherwise just let the bracket randomizer happen. I didn't seed things from first and second. I just didn't. But of course I had to save, Bounce Off for the final match because that's its rightful spot. That's where it feels the best at. So let's kick us off into the round of 16. Find out one of these 16 games will be crowned the Champion of Champions. This is the official best game of the world. And we start with Board Game Geek's #1, still in the competition, Gloomhaven versus the Shelf of Shame winner, Star Wars Imperial Assault, both which have mountains of scenario-based combat, skirmishy things that are happening, a cooperative mode. I mean, Imperial Assault has a competitive mode, but I think a lot of people just play it cooperative. Let me know how you play it if you enjoy it and what you like best about it. Because this is the only time you're going to get to talk about it as Gloomhaven moves forward in a very close 15-14 vote. There's a lot of talk because these games are so similar. I know there were some comments saying if these 2 games could just be my shelf, I would be happy. I would be a happy gamer. And I think that's awesome, right? I think that speaks to how great both of these games are. I own Gloomhaven. I haven't played Imperial Assault, but because of how much people have talked about it, well, I'd like to. I mean, I'd like to play every single game, honestly, and no one has time for that. Not even me, someone who spends most of my time, every ounce of spare time that I can on this hobby. So it is Gloomhaven that moves forward into the quarterfinals. I wasn't sure how this was going to go, right? Because I think sometimes we shy against the popular, and Gloomhaven being ranked #1 for so long, I think you get a lot of people saying, it's not my #1, and wanting to vote against that as well. But people are really appreciating the Gloomhaven system, and I think it's fun. I have a great time with it when I get to play it, even though I know I would have a better time just playing the Steam version because it would set it all up quickly for me. But I can't ever purchase that because I own the physical copy, and if I got the Steam version, I would never play the physical copy. So I'm at a real crossroads here. Hopefully Gloomhaven gets frozen in Carbonite and I don't have to worry about it. Ooh, that would be a heavy block of Carbonite. But it's not frozen yet as it moves on into the quarterfinals and Star Wars Imperial Assault gets gone. Moving along to our next match, Nemesis versus Burgle Bros. And this is a tough match for me. I think Burgle Bros has a lot of people who love the underdog competitor. I think Burgle Bros represents that sort of not wide release, a very indie take, but a solid cooperative game and a really fun theme of trying to break in and get out, making a heist, right? Who doesn't want to play a little heist game? But it's up against Nemesis, which in my opinion is one of the best story-producing games out there. It's so good at what it does in terms of creating a memorable gaming experience and creating a narrative that happens over the course of the game. I have always found this when I've played Nemesis. You have these moments that you remember, these decision points of, do I go back and try to rescue my friend or do I get out of here? And really buying into that genre is a fun experience. But this one was close. I expected Nemesis to win this one. I didn't think that Burgle Bros could upset it as an underdog. And unfortunately, that is the case. It was a 16-13 vote, but Burgle Bros falls and Nemesis moves on also into our quarterfinals. Next round, we have Sleeping Gods versus Everdell. Sleeping Gods are runner-up for the epically long game, and Everdell, wildcard number 9, coming in clutch to see if they can continue their run. This vote also went the same way, 16-13, although when I look back on it now, I see that it's actually 18-13, so it picked up a little bit more steam over the past. People going back and voting and representing their voice to make sure that it is heard in these videos. I see you, and I'm glad. I think it's fun. It's fun to see. For me, I want Everdell to win here, but I know that the hype for Sleeping Gods has been great. Both of these are in the Board Game Geek's top 100 as well, and I've never played a Ryan Lockett game, and I know that there are people out there who really love all of his stuff. But it's not enough, people, because cute cuddly creatures triumph and move forward in that 16-13 vote, or 18-13. Next round, we have Cthulhu Death May Die versus Star Wars Rebellion, a runner-up from a previous deathmatch versus a winner, or runner-up versus winner. That one. And even though Star Wars Rebellion is ranked number 8, I think still on Board Game Geek, there's been a lot of talk about Cthulhu Death May Die recently, with its new infusion of content happening on Kickstarter very recently. And we had some great supporters on both sides. A couple people ranking Star Wars Rebellion as their favorite game of all time, just period. With its fun, intense cat and mouse gameplay, where the rebels can hide and the rebels can change their hiding spot, and the slow producing of resources so that ships take a little bit longer to build those bigger ships, naturally, so you can't just build a Death Star on turn 2. So lots of arguing on Star Wars Rebellion's behalf, but it's not enough. It is not enough to take it into the next round, because it's Cthulhu Death May Die that extends its tentacles and wraps it around the Death Star and just smushes it like a bug. No Star Wars game, they seem prepped to dominate the competition, and now both have been eliminated in this round of 16. Death May Die moves on in a 17-14 vote, but I love how close these votes have been, right? If two people were to switch, it changes the course of history. And I think that's great. I think that speaks to why all of these games should be regarded as champion of champion status, as of course they are now. So I can only expect we're going to have another very close vote with Kanban EV versus Anachrony. We have our crunchy Euro champion versus our thematic semi-finalist, but really could have been in the Crunchy Euro bracket as well. I think any game by Lacerda could fall into that Crunchy Euro category. Again, I haven't played Kanban. I've played the Gallerist from Lacerda, but I have played Anachrony. I own it. It's right there. And I know a lot of my games will be reduced to Carbonite very soon, but Anachrony may not be one of them. Anachrony is a really fun worker placement. You have your exosuits, which allow you to place on the main board, because if you don't go outside in an exosuit, well, then you're going to be wiped out completely. Your skin will start to look like mine, all decrepit and crunchy. And then you have variable workers, which you can put on different spots, and if you use those effectively, they do different things. Variable player powers. I think you know why I like Anachrony. And I will tell you that this vote wasn't close. In fact, it was almost a shutout. There's only been 2 shutouts in board game deathmatch history. And by 2, I mean 1. And that was Star Wars Rebellion losing to Dune Imperium in the space bracket. That's why I didn't even consider including it in the epically long bracket, because I didn't think people were interested in it. And then there was such a flurry of support for it that when it took over Bounce Off's spot, it just ran rampant with the tournament. Twilight Imperium 4 won 16-2 over Talisman back in March, but other than that, there hasn't been a blowout of these proportions until now. If you were thinking about getting Kanban EV, I think you better just get Anachrony instead. That's what this vote tells me, because it's Anachrony that moves forward in a 25-4 vote. I mean, it could also be that more people have played Anachrony and they haven't played Kanban EV, but I think there's a lot of people who have played both and just say, well, I think I like Anachrony a little bit more. I think they're both really good games, right? I don't think you should throw out your copy of Kanban EV because you paid a heck of a lot for it, and you should be excited to play it and make sure to fulfill the whims of Sandra to the best of your ability. But it is Anachrony that does move forward, and it was 25-3, but somebody in the past, from the future, came back and threw another vote onto Kanban, and hey, because of the theming of Anachrony, I think that means that you should go play Kanban as well. So let's move along to our next matchup, which is Crokinole versus Dinosaur Island Rar and Right. And I didn't set this up as a low ball for Dinosaur Island Rar and Right to overcome Crokinole. And even if I did, well, I would have been foolish, because it wasn't that. It wasn't an overwhelming vote one way or the other. In fact, it's 18-16 now. When we called the vote, it was a tie at 15-15. It went back and forth. It was 10-10, 11-11, 13-13, 15-15. But more people were passionate about one of these games, and there was one extra vote on Crokinole, which moves it forward into the next round. Unfortunately, Dinosaur Island is frozen in time and cannot be played anymore, and it is Crokinole that does move into those quarterfinals. Only 2 more rounds to go in the round of 16. Usually I blaze through these, but I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about these games. These next 2 are no different. It's Castles of Burgundy versus Marvel Champions. We have our Cult of the Old runner-up versus wildcard #1, hoping to be #1 game of all time. The current vote is 17-8. When it was called, it was 16-8. Everybody worn out from that fierce battle of Dinosaur Island versus Crokinole. And I expected Marvel Champions to win here. I like Castles of Burgundy. I haven't played Marvel Champions. I've been playing a lot of Castles of Burgundy on Board Game Arena recently, trying to get that ever-elusive full board, which I don't think is actually mathematically possible. I think you could fill 35.5 spaces on your board. I think you could have the tile in your reserve, but you wouldn't have the action to play it to complete a full map. I looked it up, and that's what somebody said. And I find playing Castles of Burgundy online is actually making me like it less, which is weird, because some games like Solkin and Keyflower, which I used to primarily play on Board Game Arena, and then I stopped because I was getting too much practice in on them that I didn't want to not be able to play it in real life, or not want people to want to play it with me because the skill level was so disparate. For Castles of Burgundy, I feel less excited about it. I'm more excited when I'm surveying the board and less excited when I'm playing it online. And actually playing it online has made me less interested to play it in person as well, even playing with all of those different maps. I think that's weird. I can't figure out why that is. Maybe I've just played it more and now realize, oh yeah, it's not as exciting a game as I expected it to be. It's certainly not as exciting as Superheroes, because it's Marvel Champions that is the one that takes the top spot in that 16-8 vote. But I don't know what that is. I think Castles of Burgundy is a really solid game, and it's a game where I would always be happy to play. But maybe it's the rolling of the dice that feels a bit too random and sometimes can swing things. Or maybe it's just I'm bad at mitigating those dice and am throwing a little temper tantrum right now. Probably the second one. Finally, we move on to our last matchup of the round of 16. We have Arkham Horror LCG versus Bounce Off. And I know a lot of people in the Discord like Arkham Horror. It was our solo runner-up. And this was a very, very close vote. In fact, before the Die of Chaos was rolled, it was 13-14 for Bounce Off. Bounce Off was leading with 14. But there were a couple votes that were up for grabs. One vote, actually, that was up for grabs. There's a Die of Chaos. When you don't know what you want to vote for, sometimes people put this little die symbol and I randomize it. So they say, I'm equal on both. I want to have my voice heard. Give me a random vote. Doesn't matter what happens because it can turn the tide. If you vote nothing, it can't turn the tide, right? But this one could, because I did roll a 3, which 1 to 3, goes to the first one, which was Arkham Horror. So then it became a 14-14 tie for Arkham Horror. But as Deathmatch rules state, it is the game with the most extra votes that moves forward, and Arkham Horror had 2 extra votes to Bounce Off's 1 extra vote. And it is Arkham Horror that manages to triumph over Bounce Off. Looking back at it now, I can see that the scores are 15-15 with more extra votes for Arkham Horror and also with the random dice roll to be cast. So it would have been 16-15 for Arkham Horror if we extended a little bit more. All of you who are shouting that Bounce Off was robbed, well, you're right, but unfortunately it does not get to stay in the competition. I will say, and this is also brought up in the Discord, somebody said, yeah, I bought Bounce Off as a joke, but it's legitimately a fun game. And you know what? It is legitimately a fun game. If you like dexterity, if you like crokinole, if you like beer pong, well, it's beer pong. It's beer pong without the drinking, so that everybody can have fun. It's just bouncing little balls into shapes, and it takes longer than it should, and the balls really fly all over the place, but it's a fun beer and pretzels sort of dexterity game that I am fine to keep on championing in 2023. Again, making its first appearance in the top 5 cottage games of all time that I did with Matt and Dave. Well, it is the #1 cottage game, but unfortunately it will not be the champion of champions, and it is Arkham Horror that moves forward in that tiebreaker vote. So we are at our quarterfinals. Let's do this. Let's find out who's going to take it all right now with Gloomhaven versus Nemesis starting us off. Gloomhaven, we know. Nemesis, we know. I was expecting Nemesis to move forward here. I think the push for Nemesis in the Discord has been strong all year since it won. I made a point of not allowing previous winners back into the bracket because I didn't think that it was fair and they would probably just get another, repeat win, right? So I've been waiting to see Nemesis pop up, but I'm surprised at how close this vote actually was between Nemesis and Gloomhaven. I thought Gloomhaven's popularity wouldn't be as significant because it's not an older game, but it is an older game compared to Nemesis. Isn't that weird in our thinking? We think that Gloomhaven's been around for so long, but really it was 5 years ago, 2017. That's not that long. Certainly not long enough for anyone who owns it to have finished playing it. Looking back on it now, the inevitable winner is actually winning 17-14, or 17-13 rather, but it came down to a 14-13 vote, and it is Gloomhaven that moves on to the next round, which is wild to me. I really thought Nemesis was going to take it all. I thought Nemesis was going to be the winner of this tournament, but that is not to be. It is Gloomhaven that moves forward into the semifinals, and that's exciting. It's exciting to see this upset, and I'm excited to see who it will be facing off against. So let's get to that right now. In our next matchup, we have Everdell versus Cthulhu fighting for that quarterfinal spot as well. And I just said Cthulhu. I didn't mean Cthulhu Death May Die. It's just all the little tiny creatures of Everdell versus Cthulhu, the elder god that has awoken. Will the citizens of Redwall be able to take out Cthulhu? That's what this next book is about. And the regular votes here were 16-16. Those are the regular votes, but there was a flurry of extra votes pushing one of these games forward to a 20-17 vote. Everyone got behind the little cute cuddly creatures and took down the Elder God. It is Everdell that moves forward in a 20-17 vote, moves on to the quarterfinals. Cthulu Death May Die is no more. We have 2 of our quarterfinalists. Let's find the other 2. In our next round, we have Anachrony versus Crokinole. Will Anachrony continue its dominant run, smushing out the competition, or will it be Crokinole? Crokinole, the old stalwart flicker, I don't even know her, that can rally against this crunchy Euro behemoth. And this one was close. It came down to a 16-12 vote. Both fought very valiantly, but it is Anachrony that does move forward into that semifinal spot. Artie loves Anachrony. It's Artie's favorite game. Clearly, he wanted the public to know. You did, being a nice boy. And Artie also wanted us to move on to the next round, which is Marvel Champions versus Arkham Horror LCG. And the thing about Marvel Champions versus Arkham Horror LCG is that this is a rematch. This is a rematch from our solo deathmatch. Both of these faced off in the semifinals of the solo deathmatch. Yeah, sit down. He's a good boy. But again, that was back in February when the tournaments were just beginning. The turnout wasn't as fervent, and so I was very curious to see this rematch, to see if it would have a different outcome. Arkham Horror was the one that took the Marvel Champions out back then, or perhaps back then I know there was a lot of voting on, well, I like Marvel Champions better, but I think Arkham Horror is a better solo experience. So when you take that out of consideration and you just vote for who is the champion of all champions, well, you might get a different champion. And this was a close one. It was 14-16. Actually, when I look back now, it's 14-17. But one of these champions wants to be a champion more than the other champion. And that, of course, is Marvel Champions, which manages to pull off the upset. Perhaps Arkham Horror is the better solo experience, but Marvel Champions is, yes, you getting comfy? Marvel Champions is the better game. So we have Marvel Champions as our semifinalist, and we are down to 3 more matchups. 3 matchups, 2 victories to take the grand champion spot. First up, we have Gloomhaven versus Everdell. This is a close match. In fact, it's so close that Artie wanted to come and support his cuddly creature brethren. Artie was playing Everdell yesterday as well, and Artie said no more. It is time for the cuddly creatures to rise up against the dungeon crawlers and take the championship where they rightfully belong. It's time to capitalize on a box that is bigger than Gloomhaven with the Everdell Complete Collection. It is time for animals to reign supreme. And so it was a 14-13 vote with 1 die of chaos to be rolled. The die of chaos fell in favor of the person who was ahead at that time, making it a 15-13 vote. And Artie might want to cover his ears because it's Gloomhaven that moves on into our final matchup, and it is Everdell that does not make the cut. I'm sorry, buddy, but that's just how it is. By the slimmest of margins, the cute cuddly creatures are no more. And if I was a truly horrendous person, I would throw Artie off my lap right now for the bit. But don't worry, we're going to have a semifinal match coming up. A 3rd place match to see who wins, so maybe you can get a consolation prize. So I guess I'll keep you around till then. Over on the other side, we have Anachrony versus Marvel Champions. And I don't know how this is going to go. I expect, just because of Anachrony's dominant performance in that first initial stage, that it will have enough power to continue forward. But I honestly don't know. Marvel Champions beat its previous competitor. It overcame its past. It was able to triumph over evil and Avengers Endgame itself back into the limelight. Talk about time traveling. Both of these games have done it in spades, and one has made a movie about it. But only one can move on into the finals. This came down to a 15-13 vote, and it is not Anachrony that moves into the finals. In fact, it is Marvel Champions that is going to face off against Gloomhaven in our finals. Marvel Champions moves forward in a 15-13 vote, making it 2 wildcards. 2 wildcards in the finals. Does this devalue the validity of the death matches for moving on, or does it just mean that we have so many more exciting games that we can make compete against each other in various categories? I think it's the second one. But before we get to crown our champion of champion, we have one last 3rd place match to figure out, and that, of course, is Everdell versus Anachrony. This is the champion of champions. We have to have a podium. We have to make sure we know who is 3rd and who is 4th. Is it another wild card number 9? Is it Mambo number 5? Sudden competitor. Or is it Anachrony, the winner of our Crunchy Euro Deathmatch, the one who made it the furthest in this Champion of Champions competition? Potentially the champion of all the Deathmatch champions, but not champion enough. And especially not champion enough to take on Artie. Artie gets his consolation prize. Are there even any cats in Everdell? I'm trying to think. There are lots of other creatures. I literally just played this yesterday. I just heard Renee shouting from the other room, "Turtles!" I was talking about things that were on the card. Where are the turtles? Well, there are turtles on the cards. There's the judge is a turtle.
Minor mole.
Well, a minor mole's not a cat. I'm talking about if there are any cats. Oh, look what you've done. I was talking about if there are any cats in Everdell. We've heard it here first. The minor mole is the unofficial cat, and it is Everdell that does get our third place finishing position. And now we move on to the moment you've all been waiting for, which is our final matchup to crown the champion of all champions. We have Gloomhaven versus Marvel Champions. Are they going to live up to their name or not? Who will be the champion of all champions? I'm gonna have to put a not safe for work tag, Artie. Well, I'll shift over here to do it. Well, no one needs to pay attention to me, but here we are. The two of the best, number 1 and number 2, Gloomhaven versus Marvel Champions. If Marvel Champions wins this, I'm gonna have to go out and get a copy, at least replace my copy of Gloomhaven. Both have their very avid fans who have pushed these games forward to topple so many other games, and I think that is worth talking about and worth recognizing before I announce the winners. Okay, bye. There's a reason Gloomhaven is number 1 on Board Game Geek. There's a reason Marvel Champions is number 2 on customizable games on Board Game Geek. It's number 36 on the rankings. And it's put out so many expansions and packs, and people keep buying those packs because they like the additional content. It's so much content that you basically have to make it your full-time job just to cover that one game. You could have mounds. I don't know how many cards, but I know I've seen the Etsy boxes, and I think we're up to 2 giant boxes just filled with cards. You could probably say this has been more popular than Dominion in terms of actual card count and number of expansions. Either of these games would be a worthy champion. I kind of want the one that's got champion in its name. And to be different, right? Like, I don't want to just sway to the masses, but Gloomhaven has so much to offer. It was on my top value games because it has so much content. You could just play it. It could be it and another game on your shelf, and that could be your board game collection, and you would probably have a great time and years worth of board gaming with just those 2 things, that and another game. Take Gloomhaven and Marvel Champions, and the amount of content that you actually will have is enormous. Both of these games have earned a status and deserve to be in this final 2, but there can only be one number 1. And you know what? Sometimes popular sites get it right. Gloomhaven is the champion of all champions in a 15-13 vote. It wins the competition and takes out Marvel Champions. It earns the right of champion through glorious battle, and we are happy to crown Gloomhaven as the number 1 champion of champions, the number 1 room and board deathmatch winner of 2022, even though it didn't even win a deathmatch and it was in them. Where were you during solo or co-op, Gloomhaven fans? You showed up at the end, though. That's all that matters. Congratulations to Gloomhaven. It triumphed over Terraforming Mars and Too Many Bones in the group stage. It took out Star Wars Imperial Assault. It took out my pick to win, Nemesis. It took out my second pick to win, Everdell. I should have seen the writing on the wall. And eventually it took out Marvel Champions to win in a very close 15-13 vote. If you were on the fence about getting Gloomhaven, well, still stay on the fence about it because you're not going to have enough time to play it, and you can just play it on Steam. But if you get it on Steam, it'll probably be a good time. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. That concludes a year of death matches, but we are not going to stop there. We are already underway doing a lot of 2022 voting over on the Patreon if you want to get in on the voting. Our next deathmatch, the one that we are currently underway voting on, is the best of 2022. We have 31 competitors facing off, and only one will be crowned best of 2022. And before that, we're also voting on the Room and Board Awards, which will be coming out probably next week. Well, yes, they will be coming out next week because that's what I have scheduled in my head, and I don't have another video to fit in there. They will be coming out next week, announcing the winners of the Room and Board Awards, RAB Awards, the rabies. Everybody come on and get some rabies. We'll see which games get the most rabies and which do not get that coveted and illustrious title. If you want to participate in any of that voting, of course, you can sign up for Patreon. There's a link down below. Even just a couple bucks a month, you probably won't even notice it until it pops up on your credit card charge every month. That's why you should sign up for the yearly one and discount yourself. You get access to our Patreon-only Discord where we have these votings. You get to participate in the votings and all the conversation and recommendations that we talk about over there. And you get to help the channel as well. I don't make a lot of money on this thing, but every little bit does help. Every little bit does help to go in me buying additional tech. I'm going to try to make some upgrades to being able to focus as much time as I can, as is humanly possible, on this channel and not on my in real life relationships, because let's all face it, I like you all more. Whew, that was close, didn't hear. Thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate you all. Go play a game, go get Gloomhaven on Steam, and go purchase yourself a popsicle, because you deserve it. My name's Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but I do want to take this time and issue a public apology to one very special Kyle. Kyle, I have wronged you, and you know why. And that is because even though people tell me it's a good show, I just haven't had time to watch you in Saturday Night Lights. And Kyle Chandler, you specifically, I want to apologize to, and then I'll try to get to that in 2023. But seriously, I also want to apologize to Kyle the rapper, Kyle, because I haven't listened to your latest album, and I want to say sorry about that. And I want to apologize to Kyle Lowry, because I'm just not that interested in basketball. So to all of those Kyles, I want to give a heartfelt apology. You were in the right, and I was mistaken, and I just want that to be publicly known to those three Kyles, and only those three. I hope you accept my apology. See you in the next one.